There are a lot of great and lovable characters in Disney's Phineas and Ferb. Funnily enough, this extends to the show's small collection of villains as well. Whether they're endearing, funny, or a great mix of both, they're always entertaining. You have to wonder though, out of all of them, who is the most evil? I'm Caleb with Wicked Binge, and this is Phineas and Ferb Villains Bad to Evil. As always, we're going to be starting with the least bad baddie before working our way up to the most cruel and wicked of them all. For our least evil villain, we have the former bully, Buford. It may be hard to remember these days, but there was a point very early on where Buford was considered a bit of an antagonist instead of just one of the gang. Remember the thumb wrestling fight he and Phineas had when Buford was first introduced? Not exactly a huge threat, but still a bully regardless.
Ice cream fell on you!
Still, even after Buford became part of their friend group, he wasn't always supportive or nice. He would often still pick on Baljeet or would dismiss Phineas's idea and wouldn't believe in them as seen in the special Summer Belongs to You. But even in that special, Buford ended up helping Phineas and the others complete their goals after being inspired, and even went so far as to return the bikes he had stolen from them. Additionally, Buford can be extremely kind and caring towards animals, like his pet goldfish Biff and his whale Mingo friend. In many ways, Buford is sort of like an even softer version of Nelson Muntz, in that while he may be gruff and a bit of a jerk at times, he's ultimately more friend than foe. Following him, we have another temporarily evil character, Carl the intern. Now, why are we including Carl of all people on this list? 2 words. Where's Perry? In that 2-part episode, Carl was zapped with an ultimate evilinator ray, turning him, you guessed it, evil. Now, to be fair, Carl isn't the only character to go through a being temporarily evil arc.
Enough of your mindless prattle, minion.
Lawrence was also zapped by an evil ray in the episode Bullseye, briefly becoming the supreme leader of Love Muffin. However, Lawrence didn't do much of anything while evil, reverting back as soon as he saw his sons. Carl, meanwhile, was able to capture both Doof and Monogram before briefly taking over the OWCA, and threatening to take over the tri-state area. Carl even tries to destroy Agent P using Flynn Fletcher robots to do so. He also gets a pretty great villain song if we're being honest. While yes, Carl is eventually defeated and turned back to good, which is why we can't rank him any lower, but with how successful and legitimately threatening he was as a villain, we felt that we had to at the very least put him on this list. We've finally reached the show's main villain, Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz. While he may be the main antagonist and the most frequently seen villain in the series, many would agree that Doof is far from pure evil and heartless. He actually has quite a bit going for him. He tries his best to be a good father, he's respectful to his ex-wife, and he's even cordial towards his so-called greatest enemy, Perry the Platypus.
This will be the grand finale of Vanessa's party!
Many of his schemes are ultimately just petty revenge plots that couldn't do much damage, and for as many people and things that he hates, Doof usually doesn't aim to actually kill anyone. All he really wants is a bit of fame, admiration, and success. What keeps him this high in our list is just how easy it is for Doof to transition to a good guy, given how easy it is for him to work with people like Agent P or to give up evil altogether, as seen in the show's finale or when he eventually became Professor Time. However, we had to put him above Buford and Carl because, well, as unsuccessful and goofy as he might have been, Doof was still enough of a threat to qualify as an actual villain. Doof could also be reckless, allowing him to be a danger even if he wasn't aiming to kill or hurt anyone. And we see in certain episodes that, if he were to defeat Perry, he has the potential to be a dictator, albeit a really silly one. Still, compared to the other Doofenshmirtz that's on this list, we feel that this Doof has enough good traits to keep him from being put any lower. Following him, we have the mysterious Professor Mystery. Hailing from Seattle, Professor Mystery is the nemesis of Peter the Panda. He's another villain that we only see once, in the episode Lost in Danville, where we learned that he turned to a life of villainy after being abandoned by his parents. After Peter the Panda gets fed up with Mystery's, mysteriousness, he begins fighting Doof. Rather than trying to improve himself or his relationship with his nemesis, Mystery instead decides to try and get Doof out of the picture by using an unexistinator on him. However, once Perry and Peter save the day, Mystery decides to finally reveal his backstory to Peter, fixing their relationship.
I want you guys to meet my nemesis, Peter the Panda.
Although we don't know much about Mystery, which no surprise there given his name, he seems to have a lot of parallels to Doof. As such, we can infer that he's likely around the same morality level as Doof too, in that he may technically be an evil villain, but is still a decent guy who has people he cares about, and who isn't really trying to cause a bunch of damage or mass casualties. He could probably stand to be a bit more open though. Continuing with evil scientists, we have Professor Esmeralda Poofenplatz. She is the nemesis of Pinky the Chihuahua and has similar goals to Doofenshmirtz, as well as a similar petty personality, although Poofenplatz seems to be a bit more arrogant, as well as a bit more shallow.
Stop shaking, you jittery little pest.
Of the few episodes we see her in, we hear about her replacing handbags and see her stealing royal jelly in order to make her own supply of stiff beauty hairspray. She's near obsessed with her appearance, unwilling to try and take over the world until she looks drop-dead gorgeous, and she doesn't seem to be nearly as close to Pinky as Doof is to Perry. While she may not be a huge threat, not even being evil enough to meet Love Muffin standards, it's ultimately that last point that makes us consider her to be just a tiny bit worse than Doof, although she's still far from the bottom of our list. Finishing off our one-off evil professor characters, we're placing Professor Bannister here. As you can probably infer, Bannister is an evil professor, although he's from Greenland instead of the tri-state area. Being the primary nemesis being Kauka, Agent Lila Lolliberry, Bannister's main goal of his debut episode is to boost the national pride of his home country. He hoped to do this by stealing Canada's symbol of national unity, Albert the Moose, which would cause Canada's infrastructure to crumble enough for Greenland to take it over.
The moose, the symbol of Canada's national pride.
At least that's what Bannister hoped would happen. Even Doof thinks the plan is implausible and kind of lame. And considering this is Doof we're talking about, that's saying something. Bannister puts up a decent fight, sicking his androids on Lila and Agent P, but all in all, he's a pretty laughable villain. Him being voiced by the guy who also voiced Pleakley in Lilo and Stitch doesn't exactly help his intimidation factor. His deep love for his home country also keeps him from being seen as heartless. But while he does technically qualify as evil, stealing a moose in the hopes of destroying a whole country's national pride isn't quite on the same level as some of the evil deeds we'll hear about from the lower half of this list. He may do enough to put him below Doofenplatz and Mystery, but is that really saying much? From Canada to comic books, next is Kakapoopu. Voiced by comedian Ben Stiller, Kaka was a supervillain that came about after Phineas and Ferb decided to become a superhero named the Beak. Kakapoopu is a supervillain who has never had a good day in his life. So when he sees the Beak giving Danville the best day ever, he tries to do all he can to try and destroy the Beak's efforts.
And I'm here to give Danville the worst day ever.
Kaka tries to do this first by unleashing the Kaka Crawler, which is a giant crab mecha made out of old washing machines, and then by doing things like dumping a giant bucket of worms on the city and throwing water on people. As silly as some of Kaka's schemes might have been, he does eventually prove to be a decent threat, even initiating a scenario similar to the one in the climax of the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie. Though Kaka's motivations were petty and a bit silly, his willingness to actually seriously hurt people, and all of that for the sake of ruining someone's day, is enough to give him quite a bit of a boost. When he is eventually defeated, it's more a case of Kaka just giving up than him actually being apologetic and wanting to make up for his negative actions and attitude. He doesn't even seem that remorseful about fighting a couple of kids. But given that Kaka seems to be just a regular, if easily aggravated guy outside of his supervillain persona, there are still many other characters that manage to outrank him in terms of evilness. Following him is the Australian platypus hunter Lim McCracken. Having a sort of vendetta against all platypi due to his tragic backstory, Liam takes his job as a platypus hunter very seriously. After Doof hires him, Liam makes it his mission to kill Agent P once and for all. He even plans to make a trophy out of Perry, which is more than a little disturbing, admittedly. Even worse is when he declares that he's going to try and do the same thing to Doof, and ends up trying to hunt both of them for sport. Killing cute platypi is already not a good look, but attempted murder? That's definitely enough to bring Liam into the evil territory. However, we learn at the end of the episode that Liam is actually a bit of a phony, not even having a real Australian accent.
That hat don't make you special. You're still a platypus.
So hey, maybe his platypus body count is a lie too, and if that's the case, then we're able to spare him from a lower ranking. Moving along, we come to another one-time villain character, the Regurgitator. Gross sounding name aside, the Regurgitator is really more bark than bite, despite originally being perceived as a bigger threat than Doofenshmirtz. The Regurgitator proved to be more efficient than Doof, able to capture Agent P within a few seconds and not giving the platypus any means of escape. His large and buff stature also likely made him a lot tougher to fight. Given that he claims the world is his nemesis, we can also infer that he was probably trying to either take over or destroy the entire world, not just the tri-state area.
The world is my nemesis!
But while the Regurgitator seemed to be a lot crueler and a lot more focused on his work, he proved to be easily defeated due to Agent P's quick thinking and Doof getting in the way of his plans. We never see the Regurgitator escape the OWCA's prison cells, so we never get to see him do or try to do anything that's truly evil. So even if he clearly acts evil and super villainy, we couldn't put him any lower without having that evidence to back it up. Moving on to our only animal character on this list, we have Dennis the Rabbit. Dennis was a former agent of the OWCA who decided to eventually go rogue. Once he became an enemy of the organization, he tried to hack into the OWCA's mainframe and access all their information. Dennis is both a mercenary for hire and a master of disguise, being more than willing to trick people like Candace for his own gains. As such, he comes off as cold-hearted and incredibly greedy. He's just as great at fighting as Perry is, unafraid to use violence and dirty tricks to get the win. And he has an endless appetite for carrots, which proves to be his downfall in his first appearance. Later on, Dennis tries to get revenge on Perry, but even after Perry saves Dennis's life, this rabbit isn't all too grateful, nor do we see him turn over a new leaf. Really, Dennis is just the perfect example of how even cute things can be wicked. And speaking of which, next is the not-so-nice girl next door, little Suzie Johnson. Though many may see her as the cute kid sister of Jeremy, characters like Candace and Buford know the truth of what a little monster this girl can be when people's backs are turned. Given that she wants to remain Jeremy's favorite girl, Suzie will do anything and everything to eliminate the competition.
There's only room for one girl in Jeremy's life.
This includes having her dog bite Candace, ruining Candace's outfits twice, once with mud and once with soda, and of course we can't forget the squirrels in Candace's pants incident. But really, if this was all because Suzie was insecure or worried about losing her big brother's attention and love, maybe it would be understandable and possibly even forgivable. But no, Suzie reveals in the episode Suddenly Suzie that the only reason why she wants to remain Jeremy's favorite is so that she can use that to manipulate Jeremy into doing whatever she wants. Yikes. Really, the only positive thing about this is that Suzie isn't willing to torture Candace when she's off the clock, i.e. when Jeremy isn't there. Suzie may not be an evil scientist or a supervillain, but with how selfish and devious this girl is, we would not at all be surprised if she later decides to go into the evil career path when she grows up. Up next, we have the reptilian alien, Morg. Only appearing in the episode Mindshare, Morg uses a galactic interweb scheme to trick Phineas and Ferb into building a machine that swaps minds. Once the machine is complete, Morg and his cellmates switch places with the gang, leaving the kids behind in prison. Although we don't know what Morg did to be put in jail, tricking a bunch of kids from Earth into taking his spot in prison is pretty diabolical. Making it worse was the lack of remorse Morg had about it, and how he was willing to just live out the rest of his days as Phineas, all while the real Phineas rotted in a cell light years away from home. Morg even taunts the kids and sets the mindshare platform to self-destruct, which would have left the kids stranded in the aliens' bodies forever if not for Candace interfering.
Machine is set to self-destruct in 1 hour.
It's definitely one of those instances where despite the episode ultimately being a comedic one, it kind of gets darker the more you think about it. Speaking of evil career paths, we now come to Rodrigo. Rodrigo was an exchange student who was studying the art of evil science. He also proved to be very advanced for his age, being incredibly evil despite only being 16 years old. Although briefly distracted by his attraction to Vanessa, Rodrigo's main goal in his debut episode was to not only get rid of both Doofenshmirtz and Agent P, but also split the tri-state area apart, which would have killed thousands of citizens. He nearly does this too, by convincing Doof to build a stronger trap for Perry before trying to use Doof's giant propellers for his own insane means. Rodrigo also explains that he's only really destroying the tri-state area as a sort of example to the rest of the world, which he also hopes to take over.
And literally tear the tri-state area apart!
He's never seen again after being defeated by Monty Monogram, likely being taken into OWCA custody. But unlike characters like the Regurgitator and Mystery, where their one appearance didn't offer much material, it's safe to say that Rodrigo was able to show off quite a bit of evilness in the little screen time that he had. Entering our top 5 is one of 2 alien villains on our list, Big Mitch. Mitch is an intergalactic criminal and the arch enemy of Meep. Some of Mitch's crimes include poaching and imprisoning various extraterrestrial creatures and attempting to take control of the entire galaxy. Mitch's ultimate plan involved Cutonium, an alien element that makes its consumer irresistibly cute. Once he gets his hands on the Cutonium, Mitch turns himself into the cutest thing that ever existed, becoming so cute that he was able to mesmerize and nearly defeat the entire Meep army. Thankfully, he ended up getting defeated by the naturally cute Isabella and was never seen again. But while he was only in 2 episodes, Mitch made quite the impression, being campy and a bit goofy, but still cruel and a legitimate threat.
Wanna go for a ride?
And hey, a title like Intergalactic Conqueror is nothing to sneeze at. But while Mitch may have been one of the strongest villains in the series, we can't quite call him the most evil. Just outside the podium of evil, we have Mittington Random. Mittington is yet another one of the show's sort of twist villains, originally being seen as just the founder and owner of a swimwear company, Random Swimwear. However, once the gang decides to prove the existence of Klimpaloon, the old-timey bathing suit that lives in the Himalayas, Mittington decides to hide in the shadows before eventually revealing himself and capturing Klimpaloon. He then explains that he wants to use Klimpaloon to bring old-timey bathing suits back into fashion and make a fortune off them. Unfortunately for Klimpaloon, Mittington doesn't just want him as a mascot. Instead, Mittington tries to extract Klimpaloon's life force, killing the creature and infusing his life force into Mittington's latest swimwear line. Thankfully, Mittington is eventually defeated and humiliated, losing his company and any power he might have had in the process.
Like the puppet master I am!
Although just a businessman, Mittington proved to be one of the cruelest characters in the show and more than deserves his spot this far down. For our Bronze Medal of Evil, we're giving it to Alois von Rodenstein, aka Rodney. Being Doof's main rival in Love Muffin, Rodney is pretty much Doof's opposite, in that not only is Rodney much more skilled and competent than Doof, but he's much more evil too. Although this doesn't stop Doof from getting a win over him. While Rodney may mostly focus on his competition with Doofenshmirtz, he did prove himself to be a legitimately impressive villain in the special Phineas and Ferb Safe Summer. After Doof moves away from Danville, Rodney uses Doof's blueprints to create his own Inator, or rather Inizer, that is able to push the Earth away from the sun, nearly bringing in a new ice age. With this power, Rodney was able to essentially hold the Earth at ransom in order to try and take over the entire world. What really sells this is just how disturbed the other members of Love Muffin are disturbed by his plans. Rodney also shows that he goes mad with power quickly, deciding to push the Earth into an eternal winter just because one group, the worldwide supply of pretzels, didn't meet his demands.
No pretzels, no deal.
So, not only is Rodney arrogant and pretty insane, but he's also incredibly selfish, not really caring at all about all the people that would likely freeze to death in his eternal winter. While Rodney's earlier appearances keep him from getting our bottom spot, in that it took a while for his true villainy to show, his biggest scheme and ultimate reveal still did plenty to erase his earlier reputation of just being a petty rival for Doof. Getting the Silver Medal of Evil is the second dimension Dr. Doofenshmirtz. Sorry Rodney, but a Doof still beat you. One of the most infamous villains of the series, Second Dimension Doof, shows what could be possible if Doof was actually evil and competent. This Doof also takes petty revenge to a whole new level, and that his main reason for becoming a dictator was because he lost a toy train as a kid.
And one day I lost it.
Silly backstory aside, Second Dimension Doof is not a force to be reckoned with. He was able to defeat his dimension's parry, turning him into a Platyborg before taking over the tri-state area. Under his rule, everyone is forced to do what he says, causing their lives to become fear-filled and miserable, making things like summer and fun seem like foreign concepts. What really makes this Doof scary though is how willing he is and how easy it is for him to threaten to kill people, whether that's a couple of innocent kids like Phineas and Ferb or his own dimensional counterpart. But much like with our Doof, there are a couple of things that keep this Doof from the very bottom. For one, he does give up villainy for the most part after getting his toy train back, although he goes right back to being evil after Charlene throws it away. Speaking of which, it's also revealed that Second Dimension Doof genuinely loves and cares for his daughter and even his wife just as much as our Doof does. And that's still something. Overall though, it's not nearly enough to make up for all the misery and pain he caused in his dimension. Finally, our gold medal of evil is going to Super Big Doctor. Yes, as it turns out, the most recent Phineas and Ferb villain is also, as far as we're concerned, its most evil villain. In Candace Against the Universe, Super Big Doctor is at first portrayed as a kind and welcoming ruler. She even befriends Candace Flynn after saying she is the chosen one.
And you are the chosen one.
However, it's quickly revealed that she is a ruthless dictator who took over Feebla Oot and enslaved everyone on it with her giant plant mama, which produces mind-controlled spores. Not even her own brothers were safe from her wrath, given that she threw them into prison. Naturally, after Candace finds out the truth and threatens to leave, Super Big Doctor traps Candace and chains her to a treadmill so she can produce more carbon dioxide for her plant. Additionally, once she learns that all humans on Earth breathe out carbon dioxide, Super Big Doctor decides to take over that planet as well. While her personality may seem pleasant and fun, Super Big Doctor is incredibly self-centered and cruel. However, she may not be completely evil, as the film alludes to her having an epiphany once Super Big Doctor realizes that she only did what she did to make herself feel special. Unfortunately, this epiphany doesn't amount to much, and Super Big Doctor does very little to redeem herself, even if she was shown to have the potential to realize her mistakes. While Rodney and Second Dimension Doof were shown to be global threats, Super Big Doctor is an interplanetary threat, and is far more impressive and dangerous than Mitch, while at the same time being just as cruel, if not crueler, than the previously mentioned villains. For all these reasons, we're happy to name her our most evil Phineas and Ferb villain. But let us know in the comment section if you agree with our ranking, and tell us what we should cover next. Remember to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.